So let's run through some headlines that we had yesterday at the close, and then we'll get into some other macro stuff. Speaking of OpenAI and Sam Altman, they are looking to raise at a $340 billion valuation. This is another reason I think it's hard to be bearish NVIDIA here. How the hell are they getting $40 billion more of money? I don't know. I have a theory on it that I'll talk about in a second, but it looks like they're going to double the $150 billion valuation that they got back in October, which was less than 3 months ago, to $340 billion. SoftBank would be leading the round with a $15 to $25 billion investment. Now, here's my theory on this. I think there's something about OpenAI that none of us know about. I really do, because there is no way a commoditized LLM is getting investors. Like, look, I know investors can be stupid, but at this level of stupid is unheard of. Like you don't pump $40 billion into something that is commoditized. And I know the narrative right now is that the LLMs are going to be commoditized, which I think is correct. Like Anthropic, Gemini, Claude, all of them are going to be commoditized. Amazon last night, Andy Jassy tweeted that DeepSeek is now available inside of AWS. So a lot of the hyperscalers are incorporating the DeepSeek model, which is open source, into their tech stacks, which is good for their clients because they have an opportunity to then use different models, right? So the hyperscalers don't really care about the model. They just care that they can incorporate the models. Palantir doesn't care about the model. They just care about the fact that they can work as a software provider with the models. OpenAI cares about building the best model. But if everyone's building the best model, then the question then becomes, what's OpenAI's moat? And the answer to that question, I think, is something that none of us know about. I really do. I think it's something none of us know about, because if we knew about it, then, maybe the cat would be out of the bag. But I think the fact that OpenAI is raising at the valuation that is close to SpaceX, I don't think investors can be stupid enough to dump $50 billion into something that is going to go to zero, because the cost to build it, much less the cost to run it, is going to be equal across the board, which means the level of differentiation is not going to be that more substantial for OpenAI, aka they're not going to be allowed to take that much market share. And capitalism is going to compete their profits away. Like if that was really going to happen, would they be raising this much more money? I just think when Sam Altman is meeting with investors, he's painting a different story, and he's probably not talking about it publicly because he doesn't want to paint that story that publicly. He wants to kind of keep it under wraps. And I think the story is that they have achieved certain breakthroughs that we don't know about. And those breakthroughs, when they are released, everyone's going to realize, oh crap, OpenAI actually is going to be the next $1 trillion company. That's my theory. That's the only way I can justify them being worth as much as SpaceX, not being profitable, and raising another $40 billion after they raised $6 billion 6 months ago, or less than 3 months ago. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the only way I can justify what's going on here with OpenAI. Manuel says, Amit, so Palantir is now going to pump to $340 billion as well. That's how it works. Well, look, we've been making the qualitative argument for Palantir being worth $185 billion by looking at OpenAI's valuation, and now it doesn't sound that crazy, right? Like I mean, we can't quantitatively justify Palantir's valuation. A lot of the numbers are obviously extended compared to the growth. But if the market thinks that OpenAI is easily worth $350 billion and they're not profitable, what is Palantir worth in enterprise use cases that are actually producing real results? I don't know. I guess the market's gonna have to decide that. But it does seem like there is something deeper to this broader OpenAI story. 30 and a wake up says SoftBank sometimes does some stupid stuff. That's true. They do. WeWork was stupid. And I think that was like a $5 or $6 billion stupid mistake they made. But Masa-san has beef, bro. He does not want to lose money in AI because, again, he owned 5% of NVIDIA. That would be worth $300 billion if he had held on to it. He sold it for a $3 billion profit. He cries about that to this day. He's publicly acknowledged that he is not happy about that. I mean, dude, a $300 billion stake, that probably, if NVIDIA goes to what, 5-6 trillion, that would be worth $600 billion. I mean, come on, bro. That would be the greatest investment of all time. And he already has one of those greatest investments. I think he turned 25 million to 25 billion in Alibaba from like 1998 to 2010, if I'm not wrong. Something around that. He made a massive investment on Baba, and it worked out. If he could have printed $500 billion on NVIDIA, I mean, but he sold in 2020, and then he put his money into ARM, and ARM, I don't think ARM is going to multi trillions like NVIDIA is already at, and potentially going to higher. So I think Masa-san is trying to find that next NVIDIA, and maybe he sees it in OpenAI. Maybe he's wrong, but if it is, then he probably wants to be deep into that name. Okay, let's get an update from Apple. We got some other headlines to get to. We got the street opening up in 6 minutes on the day. Happy Friday to everybody. Let's see if we can end out January nicely. It's been a hell of a month for January. We got through CPI, got through the Trump inauguration. We've had an amazing earnings cycle so far. Amazon and Google will be next week. Here is Dan Niles on Apple and his take on what's going on with big tech in general.
Front, then people gave it credit. Then people said maybe it's not working, and now maybe it's working again. What's really happening here?
Well, I think if you look at it, Andrew, and think about it from a longer time period, this is a company that has grown revenues 5% over 3 years. So you have to think about that and go, how well are they really doing? They grew revenues 3% last year. And that wouldn't be a problem, except the fact that you've got a stock that's trading at 31 times versus the S&P at 22 times. And every year, people are counting on an upgrade cycle. And the problem is they've got competition issues. And they're losing market share in China, which is a big problem. The AI rollout has been slow. And what they're offering, people aren't really all that excited about. And that's why you've got these really slow growing top line. And the question is, can they get out of that? And to some degree, DeepSeek, which came out, which means that, hey, you know what, costs are dropping a lot on the hardware side. Maybe that ends up helping Apple, where they can free ride on some innovations that others have done, like ChatGPT in the US or DeepSeek in China. But for right now, that's the situation you're in, a low growth stock with a high multiple. There's a lot of other names you could go to that are growing faster. You can pick Google, Meta, for example, Microsoft even, where they're growing much faster, but they have a lower multiple.
We keep asking the DeepSeek question to just about anybody who's involved in this side of the world. You live in this world. Is there a larger implication for an Apple in terms of CapEx? If you believe that they did it more efficiently, or maybe you believe they stole it, or maybe you think it's a combination of all of the above?
Well, I think you have to remember, I was on CNBC last Friday before this whole thing broke, and I put out a post saying, look, DeepSeek's going to help hardware costs go down dramatically, and it'll help the AI agents sitting on top of it. And obviously, what Apple's counting on is Apple Intelligence, which is an AI agent, hoping to drive upgrades, hopefully later this year. I honestly think it'll be more like next year, because it's going to take a while for this technology to go through the ecosystem in the US. So is it going to help Apple? Absolutely. But remember, they weren't spending much money on this anyway, which is why they were so far behind in the first place. Where it's going to have more impact is the other Magnificent Seven companies that have already been investing aggressively in AI, where they might be able to spend less by the time you get to the end of this year as they work through some of those innovations into their own models. So,
but Dan, that's a big question. Should we look at what happened with DeepSeek and say, okay, you too can create a great model, an open source model that's free effectively, without nearly the same kind of chip configuration and CapEx spending? Or do you say, by the way, like I think a lot of the folks inside OpenAI and others might say, yeah, you can do that if you just rip us off and steal everything we're doing. Sure, you can do that, but that won't really work long term.
Well, you got to remember, OpenAI is building off of the work that Google did on transformers and large language models. And this is open source. So everybody's building on everyone else. And by the way, all of the innovations, remember, DeepSeek's open source. So all the innovations they have there, Facebook, you're going to see it in the Llama models, which, by the way, before DeepSeek came out, was the best open source model out there. And so you're going to see this permeate. And if you think back to the internet as an example, in the early stages of that, it was all the hardware companies that did great. So you think of names like Cisco or Ciena, et cetera. And then what happens is the hardware layer gets commoditized. Cisco and Ciena are nowhere near where they were in 2000. And where does the value accrete to? It accretes to the guys that are providing services to you and me, like we all use Amazon, right?
And he's right about that, but he's also not telling the full picture in regards to the CapEx that's required to create all of that value is still coming from NVIDIA. At least that is my thesis on NVIDIA. That's why I think this dip is viable. And so, yes, will the software providers benefit? Will the hyperscalers benefit? Of course. But this is such a large industrial revolution when it comes to where artificial intelligence is going, especially if we want to literally achieve AGI humanoid robots, which we have an update on, we'll talk about in a little bit, and autonomy with self-driving. we are going to need a lot more GPUs. And I think that means NVIDIA will likely do well over the coming decade.